Hello again and welcome back. In today's session, we'll be hearing what the business is doing to support you in your health and wellness. Topics will include sleep as well as mental health and will be explored with specialists in their fields. But let's kick things off by hearing from Esther Fawke, who has some important and practical messages to share with you all.
Hi everybody, Esther here. I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about well-being. It's fair to say that when we think about the definition of well-being, whether it's feeling comfortable, being happy, feeling healthy, that many of us have seen our well-being suffer as a consequence of the pandemic. Let me show you this. So what do you see? When I was asked this question, I'll be honest with you, all I saw was the dot in the middle. But I asked my 7-year-old daughter, Isabel, the same question. And she said, well, Mummy, I see the red dot, I see the dot, but I also see all of that space around it. And sure enough, she said, well, I can colour on that. And that's exactly what she did. She leave anything for 5 minutes in this place and it'll get drawn on. So there's the proof. But there's Izzy's point. I guess right now, when we think about this dot, it's what's obvious. And what's obvious to me at the moment, and for many others, is COVID and the restrictions. It's not being able to do the basic of things. It's not being able to go on holiday, hug loved ones, or even just going to the pub. And on top of that, we've got conveyancing going on at the moment. And in the conveyancing world, it's super tough. We've had lockdown 1, 2, and 3 and having to adapt everything, but also we've got what's coming up, which is our stamp duty deadlines. And that represents that circle. It's really important to know that during these times that stress plays a massive part. But before I go on to that, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everybody for all their hard work. Every single due diligence check, every completion pack sent, all monies sent out, land registry submission applications. That is extraordinary what you're all doing. You're extraordinary people. These are extraordinary times, but you're brilliant. And this business just wouldn't be the same without you guys. There's no doubt, though, with everything that's going on, that stress can build up. And experts will talk to us about stress and it being okay and being acceptable. It's our fight or flight at the end of the day. That low-lying and continual stress will play a part and take a toll on our well-being. Meet Daniel Levitin. Daniel is a cognitive psychologist, neuroscientist, and best-selling author. And he's no stranger to stress. He talks about processes and strategies that you can put in place to effectively manage stress. And he talked about in his talk a story about when he locked himself out of his own house. So he went to dinner with friends and he came back and he realised that he'd forgotten his keys. In fact, he'd locked himself out. He could see his keys on the table in the hallway. Now, Daniel lives in Canada and it's winter, so it's -40 and he's got a plane to catch the following morning. So calling a locksmith is just out of the question at this stage. So what does he do? Well, he grabs a stone from the garden and he smashes his cellar window. He makes an awful mess, climbs through and does a patch job of with a bit of cardboard to cover up the window. Now, at this stage, Daniel's body is raging with cortisol and he tries to get some sleep, but he doesn't get very much sleep. And next morning, he rushes for that plane. He gets to the airport and he realises when he gets to the check-in desk that he's forgotten his passport. And it's 40 minutes each way. He does catch that plane when he gets back with his passport, but he doesn't get his reserved seat. He has a seat at the back of the plane next to the toilet that doesn't recline on an 8-hour flight. Fair to say Daniel has a bit of time to think about those processes and strategies that he should put in place. Well, when he comes back from his business trip, he installs a lockbox in the front of the house with a spare key. That's obvious, and it will make sure that he doesn't get to near catastrophe next time. But what of those processes? But before we get to that, what's happening when we're in a state of stress? Well, cortisol is raging, which increases your heart rate. In turn, that modulates adrenaline, and adrenaline can give you foggy thinking. Daniel, as many others in that extreme state of stress, doesn't realise that he's got foggy thinking because he's got foggy thinking. Foggy thinking, stress, whatever you want to call it, can make you less productive, makes you frustrated, and all in all, you have to work harder for the same aim. So thinking about that white space, this is where this is so very important. And well-being can be majorly affected by our stresses and strains. In Countrywide, it's so great to see that so many of you been getting involved in so many of our activities. And in February, we had Feel Good February. So many of you getting in touch with us, getting involved with the Strava app, doing your cycling, your running, Zoom sessions, wellbeing meetings. It's just brilliant to see. And over 400 activities were logged for February. In March, we had yoga. So whether you're beginner, intermediate or expert, it's just great to see how many people are getting involved in our yoga. So wellbeing is just about those moments. It's about getting out in the fresh air, getting out in the sunshine, booking your future holiday, just catching up with a colleague. It's so very important for our well-being and to manage our stress. In a moment of crisis, stress can be overbearing and our resilience is just tested to the max. Many people have got those strategies and processes in place, and the uncomfortable feelings that come with that will pass. But there are others, especially those with mental health conditions, that will need some more support. Really proud to say that we've partnered up with AIG Smart Health. The link to that will be coming up on the screen shortly. There's also information available on Our Place. AIG Smart Health offers 24/7 GP availability, as well as being in touch with a team of psychologists who can offer therapy sessions either as a one-off session or multiple sessions delivered remotely. So if you're in need of support or you realise somebody is struggling and need to give others support, please reach out to AIG Smart Health. Many people have already benefited from AIG Smart Health, having not been able to get hold of their local GP. Some of those people who have benefited, you can see the comments now coming up. And we've been working with AIG for many months now. So please reach out if you need support. I'm sure you won't be disappointed with the professional help that they can give. So before I leave you, I wanted to cast your minds back to last year's conference. Sarah Lloyd talked about us all receiving plants. Now, we talked about nurturing those plants and helping them grow. Here are some of the plants in our Manchester office, all bunched together during the pandemic to be looked after. And like them, we need nurturing too. So I leave you with something which is such an important message, and possibly more important now more than ever. Please keep talking. Talk to one another, talk to your colleagues, talk to your friends. We can get through this together, and there is support out there. So for now, take care. Thanks for watching and stay safe.
Thank you, Esther. Some valuable tips around managing stress and, critically, what to do if you need help. And for those more observant amongst you, you may have noticed that Esther was joined in that presentation by her rescue cat, Alfie, who apparently likes to take centre stage whenever he can. And building on some of those practical tips, here is a short video from your colleagues across the business sharing their lockdown highs and lows.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
I think when it comes to the challenges of lockdown and living under restrictions, For me, it will be the same for everybody. Not being able to see family, friends, missing out on events and special occasions. I think that's something we all had to come to terms with.
The biggest challenges I've faced is not being able to see people face to face and missing that kind of social aspect of being in the office every day.
Everyone on the internet, which then affects my internet. Not seeing friends and family, having the worst brows ever, as well as the grey hairs.
And we closed our offices for what was going to be the next few months, to be honest. And I think I spent the next few months in this very room, or cell as I become to lovingly know it. And we had to navigate our way through some tough times. I think the decisions that myself and the business made affected all staff, and we just really wanted to make sure that we were getting it right. I don't mind saying it was tough, and I think we all had our dark moments. It's fair to say, but yeah, we got through it.
Yeah, when we went into that first lockdown, it was so much busier than I ever thought it would be, and trying to work having my children at home was really, really tough. There was definitely some tears from both them and me during that time.
I can usually leave my work problems at the office door, even during the tough times, but lockdown 1 really tested me to the limit. The 10 days between the 23rd of March, when Boris said, "I'm giving you one simple message, you must stay at home," and the 1st of April, when we agreed the legal position that we would adopt throughout lockdown, were the hardest of my working life.
And it's also been difficult as a single mother having to homeschool and work full-time.
You know, what was going on from one day to the next, really. We didn't know how long it was going to last, and it did feel like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. Really, just kind of having to watch the kids and deal with it the way they have done. One minute they're in school, next minute, you know, they're not in school, and then having to homeschool, and it was really, really hard. And the pressure that put on parents, and you know, as a parent myself, it was very, very hard to deal with.
Initially being put on furlough, having just returned to the office from being off, was worried that how I was going to occupy my time and my mind.
And everybody was pitching in, everybody was doing things that they ordinarily wouldn't have done, and we knew that we just had to get through it.
It felt like a scene out of Avengers, but when Boris clicked his fingers, more than half my friends and colleagues seemed to disappear.
Definitely the positives of my lockdown experience has been being able to spend more time at home with this little guy.
I do have a passion for creative writing, so I spent a lot of that time writing and working on different things.
I started to do running and a lot of exercise, which made me a lot more physically and mentally stronger, and I'm really grateful for that.
The thing I enjoyed most about lockdown was that everyone's given the gift of time. The time to spend with immediate loved ones, the time to watch that TV show that you've been meaning to start, the time to learn a new language, or even just the time to catch up on sleep.
In great weather and moving straight from this room to a nice beer and a barbecue within a matter of seconds was amazing.
But yeah, I think my main positive is the fact that I don't have to travel to work. I just love getting up in the morning, just like sitting at my desk at home. I really enjoy that. So
I've perfected my sourdough, practiced the piano, and I'm sleeping an extra hour a night.
Is that the things we used to take for granted, we value now. The dog's never been walked so much in its life. The dog's probably thinking this is amazing. We were arguing over who was taking the dog out next, because it was just like you wanted to get out of the house, and walking the dog was fine. So it was like, right, where should we walk the dog to?
Got to know my two daughters more than I would ever have had the opportunity to do.
My priorities have changed, and my family and loved ones have been put first on my list.
Despite all the challenges of the last 12 months and how hard it's been working with the kids at home, I've got to spend more time with them than I ever would have normally, so for that I'll always be grateful.
Hello, my name is Alex.
Thank you to all those involved in putting that video together. One common message that's come about as a result of being in lockdown is the importance of routines, staying connected, eating well, sleeping, and of course, taking exercise. Our next guest shares his thoughts about mental health, a subject somewhat forced into his world. Interviewed here by Catherine Perry and drawing on his personal life experiences, please welcome double Olympic gold medalist rower, adventurist and Vice President of Headway, the Brain Injury Association, James Cracknell.
Hello, I'm Catherine Perry and I have the enviable task of interviewing one of Britain's most successful athletes of all time, Mr. James Cracknell. James, welcome.
Hi Catherine, thank you for having me. I'll do my best to try and answer your questions as honestly and correctly as possible.
Thank you, James. James, you've achieved so much in your life and you're only 46 years old. May I start by asking how you've adapted to the challenges that the last year has dealt? And I'm talking from both a professional and personal viewpoints.
Well, it's interesting because it's only when you look back and you think it's been a year because not actually that much has happened in a year, but then you realise they happened so long ago, but it doesn't feel like it's happened that long ago because you've been stuck in the same place all the time. And in terms of adapting, I've personally found it harder as it's gone on because the first lockdown, the weather was lovely and I don't think anyone really thought it was going to last that long. So it was sort of like a month's holiday and work stopped and you thought, okay, it'll pick up in a month's time. And everyone was saying it would pick up in a month's time. And then went to another lockdown where you thought, okay, it's going to be another couple of months and then we'll get back to normal. And then once you get into the third one, not only is work stopped, I was supposed to go to the Olympics, that all got cancelled and is going to run now, but it's, with no crowds. And then the third lockdown that we're in, their timelines to come out of it, but I don't think anyone believes anyone anymore. So I think it's become, each one's become harder and harder, and then they're already saying, well, there'll be another spike at some point in the future. So I don't think, and the reality is that I think in the first lockdown, the aim was to get rid of the make sure COVID was gone, and now it's going to go from a pandemic to an endemic where it's around like flu. So we're never going to get rid of it. So everything's changing. And we mentioned work from a personal perspective. I'm trying to get a mortgage, and securing a mortgage when you're self-employed in a pandemic you're not exactly the target market they want to lend to. So I think everyone's having their challenges, but on the plus side, nobody I know suffered really badly from it, so I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And don't forget us when you need somebody to do your conveyancing. James, in 2010, you were involved in quite a serious cycling accident, which left you in a coma. You've spoken previously that you don't want the accident to define you or your potential. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think I guess the analogy I try and use is that going to the Olympics was something I did, not who I am, and I had a nasty accident and a brain injury, and I don't want that to define who I am going forwards either. And people have a lot of people have nasty experiences, whether there be employment, family breakup, accident, whatever, but you learn from it and move on. And you get a lot of benefits from being in the public eye, but there's also people know more about you than they would if you weren't. And then I had the choice of, do I admit and talk about it because it would probably help people who've been through a similar thing, or do I bury it and pretend it never happened? And I made the decision that I would speak about it, the challenges of a brain injury, so that people can say, actually, you can get through it. But the difficulty I found, both in personal relationships, marriage, through to mates, through to people I work with, and also people I'd never worked with who may look to work with you, that their image and perception of what you could achieve after the accident was limited, and you're a different person without ever having met you, or actually you know them well, they haven't spoken to you for a couple of months, or someone you're married to, and they always view you through a prism of a brain injury, and it is a challenge. And you have to, or I had to then, once I realised I was being judged that way, and I think I suffered from a definite lack of confidence and letting other people set my limits and what I could do. I had to then sort of reclaim that back and take control of my ship and where it was going. But it's difficult, and you need support around you, and also you need to, at times ask those close to you, which I don't think I did early enough.
Yeah. So thinking about the accident and your experiences in life, what's your take on mental health issues?
I think actually the biggest lesson I learned, and if I could go back and rewrite it again, I think kind of from a sporting background, that what you don't do, whether it be to your teammates or to your opposition, is show any weakness and vulnerability, because even teammates, at one point you're competing for the same spot, and people you race against will obviously chip away at anything that they can. So you don't necessarily ask for help or show any weakness. And that mindset was carried over. And yes, there's benefits, because from a sporting side, the determination and goal setting and stubbornness as well, that I thought I will improve. But there was also that stubbornness and not wanting to show any weakness meant I didn't ask for help, and mates will phone you up, ask you out for a beer, will phone up for a chat, and if you don't bother phoning them back, because I'd kind of drifted off and sort of hidden away a bit, they'll stop calling. And I realised that too late. And when I did phone a close mate up, he was like, "Why didn't you?" and say I was struggling. "Why didn't you call earlier?" And they're there for you. I think that's the one thing that if I could go back again, it would be to realise, and I've realised now, is actually asking for help and saying what you're going through is actually a sign of strength, not weakness. And real mates will help you out about it. And I think if there is a positive from the last year, it's that people aren't afraid to admit if they're struggling and feeling down. Whereas I think previously it would have been something, well, you can forget about, but you got a lot less time in the day, because you 2 hours are spent commuting, and then so much time in an office chatting to people. You haven't got so much time in your own head. Whereas in lockdown, we've all had more time in our heads. I think people have been struggling a bit more, and I think the one good thing is that people are prepared to ask each other how they're doing, and then rather than say, "Yeah, okay," they'll go, "Yeah, I'm having a bad one." That's a good thing.
Thanks. Yeah, no, you're certainly right. And I think reaching out and asking for support is really, really important. You've touched on your mental health, and you've touched slightly on confidence. And people who don't know you would think you are a really confident chap. You're an Olympic gold medal winner. So have you ever lacked confidence? And what have you done to overcome that?
Well, yeah, definitely lack confidence. I think you're right in terms of people may see confidence because you've been successful in one area, but that doesn't mean you're confident in every area. As soon as I get in a boat on the water, I'm very confident, but that doesn't mean I'm very confident in other areas. And actually, I did Strictly Come Dancing 2 years ago, and they'd asked me a number of times, and I'd said no, and because I was really afraid of looking stupid. I knew I couldn't dance, but actually I went back and studied at Cambridge a couple of years ago to actually show people I didn't know and people I did that the limits that I had after the accident were, in fact, there weren't any limits. If I could achieve there academically and sportingly, then those questions were irrelevant. And what it did teach me was actually what's the worst that can happen. You put yourself in a situation. I hadn't studied for, what was that, 93, I left university. So I hadn't studied for over 20 years. And to put yourself back in that environment is a big risk of looking stupid. And actually, what's the worst that could happen? And learning from that was actually, when Strictly asked again, I was like, well, look, I can look stupid and not dance. That's it. That's the worst that can happen. And so I think having the confidence to put yourself in a position that actually, there really isn't that you're going to look stupid. There's worse things in life than looking stupid. Like, the reality is, I probably do that on a daily basis and don't even know it. Whereas, okay, yes, a lot more people watch you dancing badly on telly than see you do other stuff wrong every day. But actually, not being able to do a tango very well isn't the worst thing in life. But having the confidence to put yourself in that situation and be prepared to look stupid, I think is a good thing, because if you don't try anything new, you're never going to improve in other areas of your life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've mentioned some of the accomplishments that you've achieved, which have been fantastic. 2 gold medals, rowing across the Atlantic with Ben Fogle, Strictly Come Dancing, which was probably my favourite. What do you think is your most biggest accomplishment, and why?
Well, the Olympics is special because you're training. Okay, an Olympiad's 4 years from one Olympics to the next, and those 4 years are going to be determined by a 6-minute race at the end of it. So those 6 minutes are going to make the previous 4 years either a waste of time or a useful process. So that pressure to deliver under those 6 minutes, and you got 3 other people. I was in a 4-man boat. You got 3 other people, their dreams in your hands and your dreams are in theirs. So that shared experience is immense. Actually, rowing the Atlantic, which I did 18 months after I did the Olympics, was actually, I think the outcome of that has made me cope with lockdown better, because I mentally wasn't really prepared for it, because it was in a boat and I was like, okay, I'm fine, I can do that side of it. But then actually being stuck in your head at sea, we're there for 50 days, took us just under 50 days, and we'd do 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So we'd split, one bloke being in the cabin, the other one rowing. So you're actually on your own for a large chunk of the day and stuck in your head out at sea, all day, all night. And I found that mentally really hard. If we'd had a leak in the first week and the boat had sunk and we'd had to press our sort of emergency rescue, I'd have been delighted, because I couldn't see the end of it, which is very similar to lockdown. I didn't know when it was going to end, and I found my own company very hard. And you're running back through situations of, that I could have been far nicer boyfriend to that girlfriend, all manner of things that you're running through because you've got no one to talk to. And rather than, I think probably halfway across, I realised actually, look, you're only going to row across the Atlantic once. Just make the most of where you are. Enjoy every day, because you're never going to do it again. And, being a tiny dot on a big landscape is a very luxurious, special thing to be, rather than sort of reliving moment by moment errors you've made in your life. And I think that was that did actually over the last year has helped. That's just sort of being happy with yourself and not overthinking too much.
Yeah. Well, the Atlantic race sounds like an amazing achievement, but as you said, mentally draining. But hopefully it's set you up and helped you for this past year and the challenges that's dealt. Moving on to health and fitness, James, I know you're a great advocate for health and fitness, but you are an Olympic gold medal winner. What would your advice be to anybody who's starting out on their health and fitness journey?
Well, it's interesting that you say it should come naturally as it was a sportsman. But the reality is that I didn't just do exercise in order to win. It's part of what I think it makes, if you look after yourself health wise, you can make the most of your life, your kids' lives, and then your grandkids' lives. And the one benefit I have had is exercise being built into my life as a habit. So it's strange if I don't do it. Whereas if you haven't done anything, that active for 10 years, it's very hard to get back into it. For example, the other way around is that when I was a full-time athlete, we'd eat 6,000 calories a day. So I still have that habit in my head of eating normally it's 2,000 a day. So I have that, my stomach's used to getting 3 times as much. So although I'm used to exercising, you're also used to eating a lot more. So I think a lot of it is behavior. And if I was starting out from not exercised for a while, I think the first thing you have to do is sort of, like everyone does with their days now, especially in lockdown, just plan. Working from home is tough. So you have to give yourself a structure the same way. Yes, you're right. Okay, I'm going to pick 3 days in the week, and I'm going to go for a walk, for a bike ride, and do some body weights or some stretching, and then write it in and plan it into your week, because then you know you're going to do it. It means you haven't got that sort of, you're not thinking on the spur of the moment, I should do something now. You've got it in your head when you're going to do it, and the same thing should go for other areas. Right, actually, I'm going to plan what food I'm going to get in, and then what I'm going to make, what I'm going to eat out, and just sort of, if you start taking control of it and making little changes, then you think, actually, I feel a lot better. I feel I have more energy, even though I'm doing more exercise than I've done. And then you'll kind of you spiral up, rather than if, as many of us have, especially the last 2 lockdowns, is that, well, actually moving less, eating more, you're never more than a couple of meters from the fridge or cupboard. It's very easy to start spiraling down. So the first thing you'll do is stop spiraling down, and then as soon as you start going up, you get caught in a nice vortex going the right way, and it's very quick to, if you, I remember my ex-wife saying to me when we had our first kid, is that it takes 4 days for it to become a habit. So when we're trying to let them cry themselves to sleep at night, or not to go in and keep comforting them, we say, like, 4 days, and then they'll have worked out you're not coming in. And I think it's that part of us probably hasn't left. If we have 4 days of doing something, then it becomes much more of a habit. And I think as soon as we get good habits in our life, we'll stick to them. The same way we're very easy to stick to bad habits.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. James, just before we leave each other, we are coming to the end of our time together. Can I quickly ask you what a day looks like for you in the James Cracknell world?
Well, it's actually changed in this lockdown time, because I have a little dog now. So although it's actually a lot of it is well, I can't call it potty training, but it's very similar. I seem to be going through the same process again, with actually a similar level of feedback. Although he doesn't cry as much, and he's much more enthusiastic to see you, but he's taking longer to learn. So having done most of my exercise in life sitting down, I'm doing far more. I would say 10,000 steps is actually, I'm doing it now, whereas I normally wouldn't, because I would either be on a bike or on a rowing machine. So walk a little dog. I make sure I do some exercise every day, and then a lot of it is planning for when things do open up again. So there's you've got the boat races coming up. You've got the Olympics is actually on, even though there's no spectators. Now we're deciding whether we're going to be commentating. I want to say I'm not part of the decision-making process, whether we're commentating from Salford or from Tokyo. So I'm guessing it's going to be Salford.
Wow, yeah, pretty different areas in the world.
Yes. But I guess the thing that I wouldn't like to be right now is an athlete preparing for Tokyo. I feel very, I've a knowledge of that in a way that, my knowledge of working, in an office 9 to 5 isn't the same. But the guys and girls train for 4 years, and then for it to be put off by another year, it puts life on hold. You may be in amazing form last year, you're not this year. It's difficult for that. And then on top of that, is it going to go ahead?
Well, fingers crossed it does, James. James, thank you ever so much for spending some time with us. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today. I'm now going to hand back. Thanks, James. I'm now going to hand back to Alice at the studio.
Thank you, Catherine and James. Sleep is definitely the most powerful, natural, health-providing behaviour that you can perform, or so says our next guest, Dr Guy Meadows. Here to unwrap the myths around sleep and how to create the right sleep habits for yourself, please welcome founder of the London Sleep School and author of the Sleep Book, Dr Guy Meadows.
My name is Dr Guy Meadows and I am the clinical director of the Sleep School. It's a real honour to be talking to you today, especially during this challenging time that we face with the COVID-19 pandemic, which I know has had such a big impact on the way in which we work, our home lives, and crucially, our sleep as well, which I'm going to talk about today. So at the Sleep School, our mission is to help the world to sleep better, to live better. And we do this in many different ways. We specialize in the treatment of chronic insomnia, and I've been doing that for nearly 2 decades now. We work with new parents, we work with school children, and we work with corporate organizations like yourselves to hopefully help employees to get better sleep. So the title of today's session is called Sleep Essentials. This is all of the most important sleep knowledge that I think you guys need to know in order to be able to improve your sleep from tonight onwards and hopefully wake up feeling a little bit more refreshed and able to go about your day. So what do we plan to cover today? Well, I'm going to talk about the role of sleep. This is my sales pitch for sleep, just to sort of get you on board. And then I'll talk about how to get the right amount of sleep and how to manage a sleep debt, because one of the things that we are aware of is that during the COVID-19 pandemic, our sleep has been affected, with some of us, a proportion of us, finding it harder to get good quality sleep, and maybe we've have more sleep debt. Also going to talk about how to create a regular sleep work routine to improve our sleep quality, because again, one of the things that we learned right at the beginning of the pandemic was that our routines changed dramatically. Suddenly we're all working from home, suddenly we're not commuting, suddenly we're eating, we're moving, sleeping at different times, and this can have a big impact on our internal biology. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about darkening down for sleep, certainly in this lit up Zoom-filled world that we're all sort of working in. It's really important to make sure we get some dark downtime. How to manage nighttime waking. So if you find that you struggle to sleep consistently through the night, I'm going to hopefully give you a little bit of the science behind why we wake up in the middle of the night and crucially what to do about it. And then I'm going to talk about or take you through a clinically proven experiential tool. So this will be a little bit of meditation practice. So we'll change the tempo a little bit for that section. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some easy wins regarding how to optimize our lifestyle for better sleep. Okay, so let's begin. Let's talk about the importance and role of sleep. So you all know this figure. 1/3 of our lives is spent sleeping. Now let's put that into context. Well, the average person in the UK lives for around 80 years, which means they spend around 27.5 years of their life asleep. That's an incredible amount of time to do anything. So that tells us that sleep is not some sort of evolution mistake. It's a fundamental part of our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. And that's what I'd like to take you through now. So what is sleep doing for us? Well, the crucial thing, it's not a phase of inactivity that for many years people believed it was. Everything you're doing right now, so you guys being focused on hopefully me and on this talk, perhaps you're thinking up sort of good ideas, perhaps you're being creative, you're sort of feeling quite motivated today, whatever it is with regards to your mental capacity and that which is defined by our prefrontal cortex, which is kind of like the head office of the brain. Well, we know that sleep has a really important role. Just to give you one little stat there, we know that if you've been awake for 17 hours, well, then you have the focus and concentration levels of someone who has a blood alcohol of 0.05%. So that's the UK legal limit. If you've been awake for 22 hours, it's double that. So what we know now is that actually sleep deprivation and its impact on our cognitive performance is very similar to alcohol intoxication. So if you are really wanting to perform at your best, you're wanting to be focused, you're wanting to be, make sure that you're not making mistakes, you're wanting to be motivated, we need to make sure that we've got a good night's sleep. What about our emotional health? Well, this is something that most of us will know intimately. If you've ever had a poor night of sleep, you'll probably know that you've woken up on the wrong side of the bed, so to speak. Now, that phrase alludes to the fact that when we experience poor sleep, suddenly we are more irritable. We have a lower mood, perhaps. We sort of snap more easily. We're more short-tempered. And this is because we get moved from that prefrontal, rational part of our brain that I mentioned a moment ago into our amygdala, our emotional center, which is very much responsible for threat detecting, fighting and flighting. And this means that our mood tends to become lower. We tend to view, research shows that we view facial expression and tone of voice more negatively when we are sleep deprived. And what we do know is that you spend a long time sort of camped out there when we are sleep deprived. Well, that can increase our risk of anxiety and depression. So basically it can lower our mood and lead to poor mental health. And that's really important at the moment, because we do know that with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are experiencing more stress, and there is a rise in poor mental health as well. So getting good sleep for our mental and emotional health is really important. But then what about our physical health? Well, I think probably the most prominent or important one to talk about is the role that sleep plays for our immune system. So we know that sleep is fundamental to boosting our immunity. In fact, some research showed that if you are sleep deprived the week before going to have your flu jab, you produce 50% less antibodies in the month following. Research also shows that if you are regularly getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, this was a study which reduced people's sleep to less than 6 hours for 2 weeks. They showed that it increased their chance of catching the common cold by 4.5 times. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that sleep is fundamental to boosting our immunity and to fighting off those invading pathogens. But what we don't know yet is perhaps the role that a good night's sleep could have in defending us from COVID-19. But as a rule, we generally know that sleep is really important for boosting our immunity. But it's not just there. Sleep also helps to wash our brains. In the night, these small channels open up and wash cerebral spinal fluid through the brain, washing out all of these neurotoxins. And one of them in particular has gained a lot of traction, and that is the beta amyloid protein, because it's a buildup of beta amyloid plaques that increases our risk of Alzheimer's. And so research now suggests that actually maybe it's a degradation in this system as we get older that increases our risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. Sleep is also really good for keeping our hearts healthy, helps to lower our blood pressure, helps to regulate our blood glucose, reducing our risk of diabetes. So we pretty much could say that it's not what sleep does for us, it's what it doesn't do for us. And we now have a great saying, which is that sleep is the single most powerful, performance-enhancing, health-providing behavior that you guys can perform. So with that in mind, just to finish off this, I really like this great quote from a great US sleep researcher, and she said, for every great house party, you need a great cleanup operation. Now, right now, the daytime, this is the house party. This is as good as it gets. This is where we are metabolizing. We are, we are using our bodies. We are breaking them, breaking down muscle, sort of replacing blood cells, etc. We are being very physical during the day. And it's the nighttime where we then need to recover, to re-energize, to regrow, and hopefully just repair ourselves and ready ourselves for the next day so that we can wake up the next day and be brilliant. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of a sales pitch as to why sleep is important for us in our lives. What I'd like to do now is just touch on, okay, well, what's the impact of COVID on our sleep? And this is from some research which came out in, I think it was sort of June time and it was research that was published by King's College London. And what it basically showed is that 39% of us were reporting we were sleeping less and felt less refreshed. 29% said that we were sleeping longer but felt less refreshed. And that was probably because perhaps we didn't have that commute anymore. So it was giving us a little bit longer in bed, but still not refreshed. Now, a quarter of us said that we were sleeping longer and felt more refreshed, and 8% said they were no changed. And I think this is a really good reflection of what we've seen since, is that COVID-19 appears to impact our sleep in many different ways. For some of us, it's a very negative thing. It's because it's also linked to increased stress and anxiety and depression at the moment, which we know unfortunately don't work favorably towards giving us good quality sleep at night. But for some of us, we are seeing this as an opportunity. So it's not all bad. Some of us are getting better sleep and sleeping longer and feeling more refreshed. Okay, so what I want to do now is to dive into what we call the sleep essentials. This is all of the essential information that I think you need to know in order to improve your sleep. And I want to give you a little bit of the science, and then I'll give you hopefully some really helpful takeaways that you can put into your life. And as we go through, I would like you to be thinking, which ones am I going to implement into my life? Which ones are helpful to me? Okay, so the first one, how to repay a sleep debt. So the first question we need to think about here is, what is your biological sleep need? And what that means is, how much sleep do you need in order to be able to wake up feeling refreshed and go about your day? So just have a think now, how much sleep do you need? Now, I'm talking about not how much sleep you get at the moment, how much sleep do you need in order to wake up feeling refreshed? Hopefully you have an idea. Now, if we look at the science, actually what the science tells us is that about 80% of the population need that sort of 7 to 8 hour figure. That's why you'll hear that mentioned so much. But the crucial thing to understand about your biological sleep need is that it's determined by your genetics. And so not everyone needs the same amount of sleep. And this is really important because you might be like 97% of the population fits somewhere between 6 and 9 hours. So if you get 6 hours and you see an article which says you need 8, that can lead you to sort of question, oh, maybe I should be getting more. But if you get 6 hours and you wake up feeling completely refreshed, well, then I would suggest that is your biological sleep need. That's how much you need to be able to cope each day. But there are outliers. Now, we know that there are some incredibly rare individuals who have a rare genetic mutation, which means that they only need as little as 4 hours or as much as 10 hours. So what's the simplest piece of advice I can give you here? Well, it really is. In this day and age now, it's to make sleep a priority in your life. What we know is that life has become more stimulating. It's become more entertaining. You know, we are finding ourselves working late. We are also engaging in sort of entertainment, you know, using our devices, whether that be our phones or box sets, Netflix, etc. So we need to, the simplest thing we need to do is to ring fence sleep, to say, I'm going to prioritize it in my life. Okay. But what if you are unable to get the right amount of sleep and you're therefore incurring a sleep debt? So first off, here's some lovely science to help you understand what is a sleep debt. So what we have here is we've got the sleepiness going up the axis there, and then we've got the time along the bottom. And what you'll see is, hopefully you can see that light blue curve steadily increasing. And that is the rise of a brain chemical called adenosine. And adenosine is kind of like a sleepy brain chemical. It's a byproduct of metabolism and it builds up. The longer you're awake, the more it builds up. And it creates a pressure or a drive that forces you into sleep. And so what you'll see is after you've been awake for 16 or 17 hours, you create enough pressure or drive to drive you into sleep. And then notice that once you fall asleep, that adenosine is metabolized. It's removed from the system. And so if you wake up, if you wake up achieving your biological sleep need, then you will wake up feeling refreshed. Your sleep drive is 0, your waking drive is super high, and you are good to go. But I guess the question is, what if you don't get the right amount of sleep for your biological sleep need? What if you cut your sleep short? Well, that means you end up with a sleep debt. So adenosine still in the system. And so what's the first thing we reach for? Well, it is our friend caffeine, of course, because caffeine is the antagonist to adenosine. It binds to the receptor sites in our brain, masking that sleepiness effect. Now, the problem is that the caffeine sort of stimulant effect wears off after a while. That's sort of the buzz that we like. And so we have another cup and then another cup and then maybe a few more. And what then happens is we get to the evening, and by this time we're feeling quite wired. And so we need the other widely available drug, alcohol, in order to, well, take the edge off the stimulant. And we end up, if we're not careful, in a bit of a caffeine alcohol cycle. Now, I'm sure that doesn't apply to any of you guys, but if it does, we're going to talk about how to manage our caffeine and alcohol later on. So I guess the question is, for most of us, we did a survey in the UK of 25,000 working adults. And actually what we discovered was that 75% said that they didn't reach their biological sleep need. So the large proportion of people in the UK are not getting the right amount of sleep for their biological sleep need, for them to be able to wake up refreshed. So, and what we know now, with even more people struggling with sleep in the COVID-19 pandemic, it is possible that more and more people are experiencing a sleep debt. So what can we do to repair it? So the good news, first off, is that you can repay a sleep debt. But the crucial answer is how we do that. So I'm going to give you 3 options of how to do that. And I'm going to break them down into time based. So how much time you have available. So option 1 is you have a high level of time availability. Your living situation allows time to prioritize sleep ongoing, which is fantastic. I guess that should be, how it should be for all of us, but it's not the case. So if it is, then we just prioritize sleep every night by making time for your sleep opportunity. And if you did that from today, you would be able to reach your full cognitive performance within a couple of weeks. That's how long it would take to recover that sleep debt if you were just to sort of get your biological sleep need every single night for the next couple of weeks. Okay, what about if we've got medium sort of time availability? And by that, I quite precisely say, what if you have 4+ days? Now, the reason I'm focusing on this is because some researchers wanted to identify how long it would take to allow an individual to return back to their optimum cognitive performance after a set amount of sleep deprivation akin to what we currently most experience. And so the average level of sleep deprivation in the UK, globally at the moment, is between an hour and an hour and a half. So researchers found that actually it takes about 4 days in order to recover. But what did they do in that 4 days? Well, they used an extended sleep opportunity. So the first night they got 10 hours, and then the second night they got the second, third, and fourth night they got 9 hours, and then they reverted to their 8-hour sleep. So if you know you've got a period of break coming up where you can hopefully focus and prioritize your sleep, maybe it's the Christmas break coming up, well then what you can seek to do is to get a little bit more sleep. Now, the crucial thing about how these guys did this is they spread the sleep over the night. So they added the sleep at the beginning and at the end, rather than just sleeping for longer and extending their sleep into their waking day. And that's really important because, as I'll come on to explain, it doesn't help our internal body clock and its timing. So if you have a little bit of time available, then you can do that. But what if you are in sort of camp 3? Camp 3 is where you have a low time availability. Life is currently not allowing time to sleep. Now, I know you guys are super busy at the moment. And so hopefully this will be really helpful for you. And this is what can we do in our lives, which is going to enable us to catch up on sleep in small sort of chunks, small ways. Well, the first one is to take strategic power naps. So I'm a huge fan of power napping. There's a ton of research behind it. But what do I mean by a power nap? Well, it's a short sleep, anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes, ideally between midday and 3 p.m, where we get a natural dip in the alerting signal from our body clock. Crucially, now this is a really important piece of advice that I give to people, because one of the biggest obstacles in the way of power napping is people who go, well, I don't fall asleep, so I don't bother doing it. Now, the most important thing to know is that actually most people are still aware can still think, can still hear it for the first 20 minutes into sleep. So actually, in the time span that you would be sleeping during a power nap, it's very difficult to know whether you'd be awake or actually asleep. So I ask you simply to take sleep off the menu. Just use it as an opportunity to rest. Now, the crucial thing about power napping is it requires practice, just like any skill. And typically it takes about 3 months to go from I can't nap to I'm a confident napper. And so, yeah, just if you have got that opportunity, perhaps post-lunch, to practice a bit of power napping, why not give it a go? It's a great way of repaying a sleep debt and giving yourself a little bit of boost to your energy levels in the afternoon so you can be a little bit more on point. Okay, what's next? The next one is schedule weekly catch-up nights. So for most of us, what we do is we deprive ourselves during the week and then we try and catch up on the weekend. Now, that doesn't really work. So what I propose is you have catch-up nights. So Monday, Tuesday, you deprive yourself. Wednesday night becomes sleep night. And I hope that's the way I said that made it sound sort of exciting and impressive. So what do I mean by sleep night? So sleep night is where you finish your work early. If you need someone to cover for you, make sure that cover is already organized. You know, perhaps don't watch an entire box set on Netflix. And then have a lovely wind down. Maybe you have a warm bath. Maybe you, sort of read a nice book, your favorite book, in a darkened environment. The crucial thing is that you're then ready for bed. You get your biological sleep need, let's say it's 7 hours, but you add 30 minutes at the beginning. So you get 7.5 hours. So that means that you wake up in the morning on Thursday with a little bit of your debt repaid. And then Thursday night, you deprive yourself, maybe Friday night, you deprive yourself, and then you have a catch up on the weekend as well. And that way we can chip away at that debt. And actually, when it comes to that weekend catch up, well, then, I do like people to have a lie-in if it's possible, but the crucial thing is how you do it. If you are one of those people where you normally get up at 7 and you lie until midday, we've got bad news, I'm afraid, because that is what we call social jet lag, or causes social jet lag. It confuses your whole biological timing. And so actually, if you're going to have a weekend lie-in, make sure that you limit it to 1 hour extra only. Okay, so those are 3 really helpful ways in which which will enable you to manage your sleep debt on a daily or weekly basis. And what I would like you to be doing is to be looking at your diaries, thinking ahead, where am I going to be super busy? Where's my sleep going to be, or my sort of sleep opportunity going to be restricted? And then how am I going to be managing that debt? Okay. So let's move on. So the next one is the importance of a regular sleep work routine. And as I mentioned, this is one of the ones which has been affected so much for so many of us. The arrival of the pandemic, the removal of, sort of our working in an office, commuting, it's just changed our daily routines. Now, why is this important? Well, you guys are probably all aware that we have an internal body clock. What you might not know is that it's 20,000 clock cells located in an area called your suprachiasmatic nucleus, kind of just behind the eyes. And it is responsible for keeping every biological process on time. So your blood pressure, your heart rate, your appetite hormones, your sleep and your weight, these are all under 24-hour circadian control. So every day they are repeated at the same time, hopefully. So it's this beautiful internal timepiece. Now, the thing you need to know about this timepiece is that it itself is kept on time, primarily by the rise and fall of the sun, which we're going to learn quite a bit about in a moment when I start talking about darkening down, but also by our daily activities, which are called Zeitgebers. So when you go to bed and when you get up, when you eat, when you move, when you work, when you wind down, every single little activity that you do in a day influences that internal timing. It acts as a little bit of a nod to the internal body clock to say, oh, this is where we are in the day. Great, start releasing appetite hormones because it's lunch, for example. So why is this such a problem? Well, what we saw with the pandemic is our social jet lag levels went through the roof. And we actually know that 87% of the global population suffer from social jet lag pre-COVID-19. So I don't know what it is now. And this is simply because just these days in general, and now with the pandemic, we live very irregular lives. We tend to eat at different times. We move at different times. We sleep at different times. And what this does is it confuses that internal timing. So suddenly it's called social jet lag, because it's having the same impact as jet lag, which is where you confuse your internal body clock by traveling across multiple time zones, where in this situation we haven't even traveled across any time zones, but we've still confused it just because we're suddenly eating late or we're lying in longer. And this then delays everything else, which means that suddenly your body is expecting to sleep much later or waking you up in the middle of the night, etc. And so what's the solution? Well, the solution, as far as sleep is concerned, is super simple. And this is one of the most powerful behaviors that we can perform. And it's great that it is so simple. It's keep a regular sleep-wake cycle. Go to bed and get up at the same time, even on the weekends. Now, I did say that you could have an hour lie-in. Plus or minus an hour is going to be okay. Try to keep it under that hour window. But also aim to keep regular working, eating, exercise, and light exposure timings and routines. And the more you do that, not only will you sleep better and have more energy the next day, but also every other biological process will work better. So I cannot emphasize enough the power of this simple health tip of keeping everything on time. Okay, now let's talk about another colossal sort of player as regards to the quality of our sleep, but also our overall health. And this is the importance of darkening down. So humans, we are solar powered. We have evolved to live on a planet that rotates between light and dark. And this is fundamentally important. So when the sun rises up in the morning, it hits 500 million-year-old light sensitive cells in our eyes. And they relay to the internal body clock to activate the release of cortisol. And that gives us this strong cortisol awakening response, which helps to give us that get up and go, that energy in the morning. And then as the day goes, and obviously it gets darker, cortisol is inhibited. And we start to see the release of melatonin, the sleep promoting hormone. And this is the most beautiful hormone that does this wonderful job at lowering our blood pressure, relaxing our muscles, quietening our mind, basically preparing the mind and body for sleep. So you can see we are finely tuned to the rise and fall of the sun, to light. Of course, what we then did is we invented these, which I'm sure many of you have got about your person right now, or you're watching this video right now with. Now, the issue with these, as you probably know, is they emit light, and it's bright light. It's also called blue light, and that is because it's the same wavelength as blue sky or sunlight. And so hopefully you've already figured it out. If you are on your device before going to bed, well, effectively what you're doing is holding a mini sun in your face, and that has a tremendous impact, because suddenly it signals to the brain, hang on a second, I don't think it is nighttime. I think it's time to wake up. Inhibit melatonin, activate cortisol. Let's get this party started again. Let's activate digestion, our appetite hormones. Let's get hungry. So rather than all of the shop closing down, suddenly, just because of the arrival of light, the body is convinced by the brain that actually the day is beginning again. So what we know is this inhibits melatonin levels. We know it can delay sleep onset, and it can reduce sleep quality as well. So it's not just about falling asleep, it's also that quality of nighttime sleep, and it can impact our morning refreshments. So what do we need to do? Well, the first thing is to darken down. Now, don't be alarmed by this 2-hour figure, because I know some people can say, okay, he's about to tell me I need to go and sit in the dark for 2 hours, and I'm just not going to do it. And that's true. I don't want you to do that. What I want you to do is to think, okay, what time is my bedtime? So just, you know what time your bedtime is? Let's say it's 10 p.m. 2 hours before that, 8 p.m., I need you to start thinking, let's darken down. Okay, let's start to reduce the brightness on those devices that I'm holding, my phone, my tablet, my laptop, my TV. Let's switch the overheads off and put the side lamps on. Let's try and create an environment more akin to our ancestors when, you know, they were in their caves and the sun had gone down. They just had this lovely orange firelight to light them, and which orange light is, as you probably know, is much less stimulating compared to the bright blue sunlight that we have. And that brings us on to the next one. Well, if you do have some sort of device, guaranteed it will have some sort of blue light filter on, which you can then activate, and that will remove a lot of that blue light from it. So if you have an iPhone, all you need to do is press that swish up from the bottom, press that sun button, you'll see the night shift mode appear, and you can then set it to come on or to come and to come off at set time. So mine goes on at 7 p.m. and it goes off at 6 a.m. and I don't need to touch it ever again. Every device has one now. If you can't find it, you can download one called F-Lux from the internet, or you can use glasses as well. But the crucial thing is just to be thinking about light. You know, sort of with light comes the digital stimulation as well from many of these devices. So it's a good thing to be thinking, okay, you know, I've finished my dinner. Now I'm going to put my work phone away. At least that's maybe one of my light sources and digital sort of sources as well. Perhaps you want to invest in smart lighting as well. One of the great things that we now have is that we can control our homes digitally. And what that means is that the home can begin to prepare you. It can begin to darken down automatically, so we don't need to control it. Also, you know, as a rule of thumb, I would say 30 minutes before going to bed, that's the sort of absolute cutoff point. That's where you want to go, okay, I'm not going to be using my device anymore. I'm going to turn my telly off, close my laptop down. I'm going to, you know, do all of those, sort of put away all of that sort of gadgetry, etc., so that I can focus on sleep. And then crucially, keep all devices out of the bedroom. Now, the reason for this, as I'll come on to mention in a moment, is that they can be incredibly stimulating. So super simple tip here. See if you can darken down in some way in your life. Okay, what about managing nighttime waking? So I'm sure there are some of you who wake up in the middle of the night and wish you didn't. So hopefully this lovely bit of science will help to explain why we wake up. So up the side, you'll see that we have different sleep stages. So we've got, I'm going to start with, you probably know we have 3 sleep stages, light, deep, and REM. I'm going to start with light because that's where we begin our sleep. And that's the entry level of sleep. As I mentioned, for many of us, we're not actually aware that we're actually asleep during this phase, but it is still really crucial. It does some great role in helping sort of the onboarding of memory, but as well as energy conservation. So it is really important. And then we have deep sleep. Deep is where we get most of our physical growth and repair, and it's where we are most removed from the world. That's why it's all the way down the bottom. And then we have REM, rapid eye movement sleep, which most of you probably know as dream sleep. What you might not know is we're paralyzed in dream sleep to stop us acting out our dreams. And what you might not know is that dream sleep is the most active phase of sleep. And it's called paradoxical sleep because it's most similar in its structure to wakefulness. And one of the really interesting things about it is this is where we do most of our psychological repairs, where we're doing a lot of our emotional processing, but also memory processing occurs in REM as well. So what I would like to do with you guys is I would like you to take you through this sleep hypnogram, and I'm going to need your focus here to follow with me. And as I go through, I'd like you just to think about what sort of jumps out to you, and then I'll cover off some of the basics. So we're going to start in the top left-hand corner where it says awake. And what you'll see is that a normal sleeper is awake for about 20 minutes, and then they'll drop down into light, and then they drop down into deep, and then they come back up, you'll see, and then they have a little bit of REM, and then there's that little sort of line firing up, and that is just a little brief awakening lasting 2 or 3 seconds. And that whole process of going down the ladder and then up the ladder lasts about 2 hours, and it's what we call a sleep cycle. Okay, so then we do the same. So we go down the ladder, we go light sleep, deep sleep, back up, and then we have REM again. And so that's another cycle. And now at this point, they've woken up fully, which is perfectly normal once a night. Maybe their bladder was full, they went to the toilet. Okay, but now we drop back down. Now you'll see there's a noticeable difference. There will still be deep sleep, but it's this is just a little bit black and white. There's a little bit of deep sleep, but then we have much more light, much more REM, another awakening. So that's another cycle done. And then we've got down into light sleep again, REM sleep, awakening, light sleep, and then we wake up. So I wonder what grabs your attention. So the first thing that most people notice is the fact that all of the deep, or the majority of the deep, is at the front. And that's right. As I mentioned before, our sleep drive builds up throughout the day. And what that does is then pushes us into the deepest phase of sleep. So that explains why we go into the majority of our deepest sleep, deep sleep at the beginning. And then the second part of the night is much more about REM and light sleep. And because that's quite an active phase of sleep, that also explains why we can wake up more in the early hours of the morning than compared to the first part of the night. Okay, some of you might have noticed there doesn't seem very much deep sleep. Actually, we only spend 20% of the night in deep, 50% in light, and 30% in REM. So you can see that good quality sleep is achieving complete cycles of light, deep REM, light, deep REM. It's not about just getting deep sleep as some of us want or wish. It's actually about all sleep stages, light, deep, and REM, have incredibly important biological functions, and we want to make sure that we get all of them. Okay, so what's the final thing, and probably the most important thing that I want to show you, is this: the fact that we wake up. So I should have said that this sleep hypnogram is for a normal sleeper. So it might surprise you that we wake up so much. So why on earth do we wake up so much? Well, one theory is that 40,000 years ago, if you're on the plains of Africa going down for an 8-hour sleep, the chances are you weren't going to wake up. So sleep was incredibly dangerous for us. So we have evolved to sleep in small chunks, in cycles, this sort of 1.5 to 2 hours long, which enable us to wake up, check for danger, and then fall back to sleep. Well, these days we don't have a huge amount of danger, hopefully, in our bedrooms. And so we can sleep a little bit more soundly or more consolidated. But we do still have these little brief awakenings. Now, these are problematic because what that means is, well, one, because of the timing of our sleep, it means that we can wake up at the same time every single night. So there might be some of you going, that explains why I wake up at 2 minutes past 2 every single night. Because if you go to bed at the same time, your cycles will play out in the same way, and then you'll wake up at the same time. But that can be really frustrating, especially if your thinking mind then hijacks that time period. It suddenly rushes in and goes, what have we got to worry about? And it starts to worry about everything that's going on in your life. And so the crucial thing is how you behave in this moment. Now, for many of us, sadly, because I think it's about 90% of the UK now keep their mobile phone in their bedroom as their alarm clock. What this means is most of us might check the time, or if we're awake in the middle of the night, we might drift onto our phones, go on to the BBC News, check social media, maybe start emailing, etc. The problem is that it only takes pulses of blue light lasting 0.2 seconds to inhibit our melatonin levels. And that's let alone then if we have some stimulation from a text from a friend or a family member or an email update. And so you get the cognitive and the emotional stimulation, which takes you from a state of quiet wakefulness, which is where we want to be, because that's closest to sleep, into active wakefulness, which is probably hopefully where you guys are right now, in this sort of state of active wakefulness, fully alert, ready about to go about your day. But as soon as you start engaging with your mobile phone, or even getting up and doing things, or even switching on the light to read, you start to move more into that active wakefulness phase. Okay, so the crucial take-home point here is remember that it's normal to wake in the night and to adopt a state of quiet, restful wakefulness. Okay, what I'd like to do now is to change tempo a little bit. And this is for anyone who finds themselves either awake at the beginning of the night, or in the middle of the night with a busy mind. And perhaps you've done this. Perhaps your mind has been racing, and what you've tried to do is you've tried to suppress those thoughts. You've tried to block those thoughts out. And the more that you've blocked them, unfortunately, the stronger, more numerous they've become, and you've become even more wide awake. So at the Sleep School, what we've been doing is pioneering the use of acceptance and mindfulness-based techniques in order to help people sleep better, especially in the area of chronic insomnia. And I'd like to just share with you a little technique. So could I get you guys right now to join me in a little experiential practice? Now, I would like to begin this exercise with just some simple deep breathing. Now, if you want to, you can do this sat upright. If you want to, do it lying down, you're more than welcome to. But what I would like you to, if you're doing it sat upright, I would like you to sit upright with a strong back and a soft front. And just begin by taking 3 nice, long, slow, deep breaths in. And if you put your hand on your stomach, that's where I want you to be breathing into. I want your stomach to be moving. So as you breathe in, that your stomach's going to rise and then it's going to fall. And if you can just make your out breath last a little bit longer than your in breath, we know that helps to activate your parasympathetic nervous system and your relaxation response a little bit more. So perhaps just do a couple more of those right now. Okay, and then on the next out breath, what I'd like you to do is to gently close your eyes or lower your gaze, and I'd like you to focus your attention onto your breath. So you're just going to pay attention to the movement of your breath. And what I'd like you to do is to notice one part of your breath that stands out most to you. So as you're breathing, perhaps notice the rise and fall of your chest or stomach as you breathe in and out. Perhaps you can notice the air rushing in and out of your nose. And so you're just choosing to focus your attention onto this one part of your breath. And we're going to call this your anchor, because it's an anchor for your mind's focus and attention. And so you're just going to focus on it moment by moment, breath by breath, just watching as your breath passes through that point each moment. Now, as you do this, you may notice that your mind suddenly wanders off. And that's perfectly normal. Wanders off onto a thought, an image, a memory. And when that happens, I'd like you to acknowledge it. It's a worry, it's a judgment, whatever it may be. And then let go of holding it by just returning your attention back onto that anchor spot again, back onto that one part of your breath that you've been focusing on. So you're just paying attention to your breath. And if you want to, feel free to say the words in as you breathe in and out as you breathe out. Now, as you do this, you may notice that your mind wanders off again and again, maybe even 100 times, and that is absolutely fine. Just gently bring it back 100 times. And the crucial learning here is that we're just choosing to focus on our breath, using it as an anchor to the present moment. And each time our mind wanders off, we're open to the fact that it does that. But then we let it go and we come back to our breath. Okay, when you're ready, gently move your fingers and toes. Open your eyes and come back to the room. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that little noticing breath, let go session. So what do I want you to do? Well, if you find yourself awake at the beginning or in the middle of the night, I would like you to practice that exercise. And you can practice it by beginning with just a few deep breaths. It's always a great way to begin any meditation, just to sort of hopefully relax any tension that might be there. Just combine it with getting yourself settled, as we did. And then you come down to noticing your thoughts, noticing your breath, and then noticing thoughts as they come by. Now, the crucial thing about this exercise is that we're trying to promote something called psychological flexibility. So it's not designed to make you more relaxed. It's not designed to get you to sleep. It's actually designed to promote psychological flexibility, your ability to notice yourself having thoughts, perhaps tricky thoughts, which are racing around your mind, but not get so stuck in them, to be able to allow them to pass and to come back to your breath, this anchor point. And what that helps to do is that it cultivates a state of quiet wakefulness. And that's the place from which sleep can emerge. So what we've learned at the sleep school over many years is that you can't control sleep. And the more you try to, as some of you've probably learned, well, the further sleep goes away. So this is about creating a state of quiet wakefulness. So hopefully you can practice that. Okay, so the final thing that I want to talk to you guys today is about optimizing your lifestyle for better sleep. And as I mentioned, this is some of the easy wins that hopefully we can do to have a really big impact on our sleep. So I'm calling the lifestyle factors a pre-wind down. So because this is all the stuff that you can do in the day, which will have a really positive impact on your sleep at night. And what we often say is the nighttime is a reflection of your daytime. So let's begin with caffeine, because that's one of the first ones that we need to be aware of. Caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours and a quarter life of 12 hours. So if you have a coffee at midday, a quarter of that caffeine will still be in your system at midnight. So we need to be careful, but that doesn't mean we need to abstain completely. I always say, if you really like your coffee, well then have, 2 or 3 caffeinated beverages, but from midday onwards, swap to decaf or herbal alternatives. If that sounds sort of too much to swallow right now, then perhaps, start at, 4 or 3 p.m. and slowly work back. Okay, the next one is smoking. Now, something to know about smoking is that you are 2.5 times more likely to experience fragmented sleep if you smoke. So it really benefits to stop smoking. But if you do smoke, then you want to leave at least 4 hours between smoking and sleeping. That includes vaping, and that's to remove the nicotine. Diet also plays a really important role. Now, the thing to understand is that we have these 2 colossal biological processes, digestion and sleep. And sadly, they are not good friends. If you have a big meal just before going to bed, well, basically, one of the things that the meal does is it increases your metabolism, which increases your core body temperature, and that prevents you from falling asleep. Let alone the fact that you've then got a sort of a belly full of food, and that sort of which then struggles to be digested, and that hampers digestion, increasing the storage of that food to fat as well. So we want to leave ideally at least 2 hours between eating and sleeping. We want to, if we can, leave it a bit longer, maybe up to 4 hours, and make your evening meal as light and healthy as possible, so that from a digestive perspective, we're preparing the body for sleep. And also make sure that we avoid, the obvious, the sugar, the stimulants, such as sugar, caffeine, anything which, might often, we certainly have a tendency, we might have some chocolates or, some sort of sugary pudding, etc. at the end of the day. That unfortunately can potentially impact our sleep quality. So we want to, if you're a fan of chocolates at the end of the day, perhaps move it to after lunch instead. Okay, alcohol. Sadly, alcohol is not a friend of sleep either. We know if alcohol is still in the system when you are sleeping, it will fragment your sleep, and it increases your chance of not getting into REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And so, as a rule of thumb, if you are going to drink alcohol, if you have a glass of wine at, say, 7 p.m., it should be cleared from your system by around sort of 9:30 or 10 p.m. And so it should have limited impact on your sleep. If you drink a lot more alcohol, then it will be in your system. So, but, you know, generally, if you want to get really good sleep, then you just need to make sure that there are nights where you are not drinking alcohol. And then exercise. Exercise is fantastic for sleep, but it's all about when you do it. So you want to make sure you leave at least 2 hours between exercising and sleeping, because one of the things about exercise is it elevates our core body temperature, and we need a 1 degree drop in our core body temperature in order to be able to fall asleep. Now, one thing that we do know is that having a regular exercise plan is actually really important. It's much better for sleep than, say, an ad hoc session. And that's because exercise acts as a sort of a neurological calming activity. It helps to calm our stress. It helps to calm our anxiety, and that has a really positive, strong effect on sleep, as well as the fact that exercise also just helps to tire us out and can increase the depth and the speed at which we fall asleep as well. Okay, and then that leaves us for that 2 hour point where we start to darken down and wind down and prepare for sleep. So hopefully that's given you some really easy wins to improve your sleep. Okay, so what have we discussed so far? So we spoke about how sleep is the foundation for your physical and mental and emotional health. I spoke about aiming to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, or your biological sleep need, depending on what that is. Plan regular catch-up nights to manage a sleep debt. So maybe a power nap, maybe a catch-up night, maybe sort of that shorter lie-in. Make sure that you darken down at least 30 minutes, if not 2 hours before going to bed. Adopt a state of calm, quiet wakefulness if you wake up in the middle of the night, and practice that let go, noticing breath meditation, and then perhaps choose one of those small lifestyle changes that to enable you to improve your sleep. Okay, so I would like you to commit to one new sleep habit from tonight onwards. So just think about, what have I been talking about today, and what's the one thing that you could do which will have the biggest impact on your sleep? And I'd like you to do that one thing for the next week, and then perhaps think about, okay, and then build in another one and slowly build it up. And that's the great thing about sleep. Sleep is a trainable skill that you can become better at. Okay, so it just leaves me to say thank you so much. I really hope that you've benefited from this session. I hope that you've taken something away. If you want to find out more about the Sleep School, just go to sleepschool.org, and there's all our social channels as well. Otherwise, from me, it's simply thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great sleep tonight and wake up feeling super refreshed tomorrow. Take care.
Many thanks to Dr. Guy Meadows there. So many practical tips and just top advice for us to take away and implement. And a big thank you to James Cracknell, yes, James Cracknell, for being so open and honest in that interview. And of course, everyone who shared their experiences in that personal lockdown video. Thank you so much. As we move out of lockdown gradually back to some level of normality, let's make sure that we don't lose all of those positive things that we've come to value in this unprecedented time. Let's remember to check in with each other. It really doesn't take much time at all to ask, how are you doing? And make sure we ask twice. Health and well-being is not something that's temporary. It's something we need to build into everything we do every day going forward. And finally, a big thank you to all of you for helping guide this business through such a busy and turbulent time. We couldn't have done it without you, simply couldn't have done it. You are extraordinary people, and I'm proud to be part of your team. So thank you. Now over to Alice for a final few points on logistics.
Thank you, Darren. We're almost at the end of our annual conference, but we have one more exciting event to remind you about. At 5:30 p.m. tomorrow, please be ready for a virtual conveyancing team night out. Now, this team night out will comprise of 3 very distinct courses. For starters, we'll be kicking off with a unique gin drinking experience. And this will be followed by a main course of recognition in our annual awards ceremony with a difference. And from there, we're going to move to a dessert of gastronomic delight by joining 2-star Michelin chef Michel Roux Jr. and former England rugby captain and British and Irish Lions legend Lawrence Dallaglio in an exclusive live Zoom experience, all from the comfort of your own home. So there you have it, a fun-filled Friday night to bring this year's virtual conference to a formal close. And that just leaves me to say thank you for watching and good afternoon.